Hannah and James had built a beautiful life together. Their marriage was strong, their home was warm, and their careers were thriving. James worked as a banker, handling financial portfolios with precision, while Hannah excelled as an assistant manager in a prestigious real estate company. They had dreams of traveling the world, buying a bigger house, and maybe even starting a family. But life, as they soon discovered, had a way of throwing unexpected storms. One fateful morning, James came home with a dark cloud hanging over him. He slumped into the couch, his face pale and defeated. "Hannah, I lost my job." His voice was barely above a whisper. Hannah froze. "What? How? You were one of their best employees." "There was an issue with missing funds. They think I had something to do with it. But I swear, Hannah, I had nothing to do with it." She rushed to his side, holding his hands. "I believe you. We'll get through this." But as days turned into weeks, and then months, the reality of unemployment weighed heavily on James. He applied for jobs, but none seemed promising. The confident man she had married was slowly crumbling under the weight of rejection. Then, one day, an opportunity knocked. "Honey," Hannah said excitedly after work, "there's an opening at my company. I spoke to my boss, Mr. Mark, and he agreed to interview you." James's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Really? That's amazing, Hannah, thank you." The following morning, James dressed sharply and headed for the interview. Hannah felt hopeful. Finally, things might return to normal. But what happened next would change everything. After James left the office, Mr. Mark called Hannah into his office. She assumed it was about James's interview. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare. "Hannah, you've been an exceptional employee," Mark began, smiling in a way that made her uncomfortable. "You deserve to be treated like a queen." She smiled nervously. "Thank you, sir." He leaned in closer, his tone shifting. "I want to take care of you, Hannah. Better than your husband ever could." Her body tensed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. "If you want your husband to get this job, you'll spend one night with me." Hannah's heart stopped. "Sir, this is inappropriate. I'm married." Mark chuckled, his smile widening. "I know, but you have a choice. Either you agree to my request, or your husband stays jobless." Her hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream, to slap him, to tell the world what kind of man he was, but all she did was stare, her breath caught in her throat. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. I can't." "Then neither can I." He leaned back, his smile fading. "Let me know when you change your mind." Hannah stormed out of the office, her mind spinning. When she got home that night, James greeted her with hopeful eyes. "How was work? Did you talk to the CEO?" She opened her mouth to tell him the truth, but then she stopped. What if James confronted Mark? What if he told her to quit her job? They needed her salary now more than ever. Forcing a smile, she lied. "Yes, he said he'll review it and get back to you." That night, as James slept peacefully beside her, Hannah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What was she going to do? Days passed, but James received no call from Hannah's office. He remained hopeful, but Hannah knew the truth. Mr. Mark was waiting for her decision. At work, things became unbearable. Mark no longer treated her with the respect he once did. Instead, he burdened her with extra work, making her stay late while her colleagues left on time. He ignored her in meetings and found every excuse to criticize her performance. One evening, after another exhausting day, Hannah returned home to find James sitting in the dimly lit living room. He had a hopeful smile on his face. "Maybe tomorrow I'll hear from your boss," he said. "I just need one chance." Hannah felt her stomach tighten. She couldn't take it anymore. Watching James struggle, seeing him lose confidence in himself, it was breaking her heart. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she made a decision. If one night with Mark meant James could finally get a job, maybe it was worth it. The next morning, she walked into Mark's office, her hands trembling. "Let's do it," she whispered, barely able to meet his eyes. A slow, victorious smile spread across Mark's face. "Smart choice, Hannah, but remember, this stays between us." Hannah felt sick. That evening, she met Mark at a luxurious hotel. As she stood outside the room, she hesitated, her heart pounding against her ribs. A voice in her head screamed at her to leave, to run home to James. But the image of her husband, sitting jobless in their small apartment, stopped her. Swallowing her guilt, she stepped inside. It was over quickly. When she returned home that night, she felt hollow. She couldn't look James in the eye. When he tried to hold her, she pulled away. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I'm just tired," she mumbled, turning her back to him. But sleep did not come for Hannah that night. The next morning, James received an unexpected call. It was from his former bank. "Mr. James, we've reviewed your case. The missing funds had nothing to do with you. We sincerely apologize for the mistake. As compensation, we are offering you a promotion to branch manager. You can resume work immediately." James was stunned. "Are you serious?" "Yes, sir. Congratulations." Tears welled in his eyes as he hung up. He rushed to Hannah, who was preparing breakfast. "Hannah, they cleared my name. I got my job back. And I've been promoted." Hannah turned slowly, her face pale. "That's great news," she whispered. Before she could process it, another notification beeped on James's phone. He checked his email and gasped. "A message from your company," he said. "They're offering me the job there, too." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. The weight of what she had done hit her all at once. She had given herself to Mark for nothing. James had gotten his job back on his own. Her knees buckled and tears spilled down her face. "Why are you crying?" James asked, confused. "It's nothing," Hannah lied. "I'm just so happy for you." But inside, her heart was breaking. Hannah felt like she was suffocating. Each moment spent with James became unbearable, not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't look at him without feeling the crushing weight of guilt. She had sacrificed herself to secure his job, only to realize it was never necessary. James had reclaimed his position on his own. Every time he smiled at her, every time he held her hand, she wanted to break down and confess everything. But she couldn't. If James knew the truth, he would never forgive her. The following morning, James made his decision. "Hannah," he said over breakfast, "I've decided to return to the bank. They offered me a higher position and it's what I know best." She forced a smile. "That's great. I'll call your boss today and let him know I won't be taking the real estate job." Hannah's stomach twisted into knots. James had no idea what kind of man he was about to reject. Later that day, while James was at the bank finalizing his paperwork, Hannah arrived at work, dreading what was to come. As soon as she stepped into the office, Mark's secretary told her, "Mr. Mark wants to see you." Hannah swallowed hard and walked into his office. Mark sat behind his large desk, a smug grin on his face. "Congratulations to your husband," he said, folding his hands together. "He called to inform me that he got his job back and won't be working here." Hannah nodded, avoiding his eyes. "Yes, so, everything is done now. Please, let's just forget about what happened." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Forget? Oh no, Hannah, we're just getting started." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I did what I promised. I got your husband a job. Now I want my reward to continue." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "We had a deal. One night. That's what we agreed on." Mark leaned forward, his expression darkening. "You really think you can just walk away? No, Hannah. You belong to me now." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, don't do this." Mark smirked. "Either you agree to my terms, or I'll tell your husband everything. Imagine his face when he finds out what you did. Do you think he'll ever look at you the same way?" Hannah felt her knees go weak. The thought of James knowing the truth, of seeing the love in his eyes turn to hatred, was too much to bear. She fell to her knees. "Please, Mark, don't destroy my home, I beg you." Mark stared at her for a moment, then leaned back, satisfied. "Then you know what to do." Hannah left his office feeling like a prisoner, trapped in a nightmare she had created. That night, as she sat alone in her bedroom, she realized she had only two choices: tell James the truth and risk losing everything, or continue living a lie and let Mark control her life. She didn't know which was worse. Hannah could barely focus at work. Every time she walked past Mark's office, she felt his eyes on her, a silent reminder that he owned her secret. She had never felt so powerless. At home, James was happier than ever. His promotion had restored his confidence, and he was making plans for their future. "I was thinking," he said one evening as they ate dinner, "since we're both earning well now, maybe we should start looking for a new house, a fresh start." Hannah forced a smile. "That sounds nice." In reality, she felt like she was drowning. Every night she lay beside James, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy with guilt. She wanted to tell him, to unburden herself, but the fear of losing him kept her silent. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't staying silent. One afternoon, as she worked at her desk, she received a message from him. "Meet me at the hotel tonight, same place, same time." Her hands trembled as she read the text. She wanted to refuse, to fight back, but she knew Mark wouldn't stop. If she didn't go, he would tell James everything. That evening, as she prepared dinner, James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You've been so distant lately," he murmured, kissing her shoulder. "Is something wrong?" Hannah stiffened. She couldn't let him see the pain in her eyes. "I'm just tired from work," she lied, pulling away. "I think I need some fresh air." Before he could ask more questions, she grabbed her purse and left. James watched her go, a frown forming on his face. Something wasn't right. Hannah arrived at the hotel, her heart pounding in her chest. As she walked through the lobby, she felt disgusted with herself. How did I let things get this far? She stepped into the elevator, her hands shaking. Just as the doors were about to close, a voice called out, "Oh." She turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. It was James. He stood at the entrance of the lobby, staring at her in shock. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then James took a slow step forward, his voice low and firm. "What are you doing here?" Hannah opened her mouth, but no words came out. James's eyes darkened with realization. He glanced at the hotel sign, then back at her. "Hannah!" His voice broke. "Tell me the truth." Tears filled her eyes. She had no more lies left to tell. Hannah stood frozen in the hotel lobby, her body trembling. She felt like the walls were closing in on her. James took another step forward, his eyes searching hers. "Hannah, what are you doing here?" His voice was calm, but she could hear the pain beneath it. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? That she was here to meet Mark? That she had sacrificed herself for a job James didn't even need? James took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. "Are you meeting someone?" Hannah's lips quivered. She wanted to lie, to make up some excuse, but she knew he wouldn't believe her. Just then, her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down. It was a message from Mark. "Room 305. Don't keep me waiting." James saw the message on her phone. His entire body stiffened. "Hannah." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Who is in room 305? Tears streamed down her face. "James, I can explain." But James had already turned, storming toward the elevator. "James, please." Hannah ran after him, but he was too fast. He slammed the elevator button, his fists clenched. The doors opened and he stepped inside. Hannah grabbed his arm. "Please, don't do this," she begged. James yanked his arm away. "You're meeting another man at a hotel, Hannah. What is there to explain?" His voice was raw with hurt. The elevator doors closed, and he was gone. Hannah's heart pounded. What have I done? She ran for the stairs, racing up to the 3rd floor. She had to stop him before it was too late. By the time she reached room 305, the door was already open. Inside, James stood face to face with Mark. Mark leaned against the desk, a smug smile on his face. "Well, well," he said. "James, nice of you to drop by." James's hands were shaking. His eyes flicked between Mark and Hannah. "So it's true," he whispered. "You and him." Hannah burst into tears. "James, I didn't want to. He forced me. He blackmailed me." Mark chuckled. "Oh, come on, Hannah. Don't act like you didn't enjoy it." James turned to Mark, his face dark with rage. "You son of a..." Before Hannah could react, James lunged at Mark, grabbing him by the collar. "You ruined my wife's life. You destroyed my home." Mark smirked. "I didn't force her to do anything. She made a choice." James's fist flew, landing square on Mark's jaw. Mark stumbled back, blood trickling from his lip. Security rushed in, pulling James back. Hannah sobbed. "James, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do." James shook his head, his eyes filled with pain. "You should have told me, Hannah. You should have trusted me." He turned and walked away. Hannah fell to her knees, her world crashing down around her. James was gone, and she wasn't sure if he would ever come back. Hannah sat on the hotel floor, her heart pounding. The weight of her choices crushed her. James was gone, and she didn't know if he would ever forgive her. Mark wiped the blood from his lip and smirked. "Well, that was dramatic." Hannah turned to him, eyes burning with anger. "You ruined my life," she screamed. Mark chuckled. "Oh, please. You ruined it yourself the moment you walked into this hotel." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But don't worry, Hannah. This doesn't have to be the end. James will leave you, but I can take care of you. I can give you a good life." Hannah's stomach churned with disgust. "I would rather have nothing than be with you." Mark's eyes darkened. "You'll regret that." Hannah didn't stay to hear more. She ran out of the hotel, tears streaming down her face. She had to find James. She rushed home, praying he would be there. But when she opened the door, the house was eerily silent. James's suitcase was missing. Hannah's chest tightened. No. No, no, no. She ran to the bedroom, hoping he was still packing, that she could stop him, but the closet was nearly empty. Then she saw it. A letter on the bedside table with her name written in James's. With shaking hands, she picked it up and began to read. "Tonne. I don't know where to start. My heart is broken. I keep asking myself if I ever truly knew you. I would have done anything for you. If you had told me what Mark was doing, I would have fought for you, but instead you let him win. I can't look at you without seeing betrayal. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I need time to think. Don't look for me. James." Hannah clutched the letter to her chest and sobbed. She had lost him. For days, Hannah barely ate or slept. She called James's phone repeatedly, but he never answered. At work, she avoided Mark. The mere sight of him made her sick. Then, one day, Mark called her into his office. She walked in, standing stiffly as he leaned back in his chair. "Have you thought about my offer?" he asked smugly. Hannah's hands curled into fists. "I quit." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I quit," she repeated, her voice steady. "I won't let you control me anymore." Mark laughed. "And what will you do without this job?" "I'll survive," Hannah said, "but I won't sell my soul to you anymore." Mark's smirk disappeared. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away?" "Yes," Hannah said firmly, "and if you try to ruin me, I will tell the world what kind of man you really are." Mark's face twisted in anger, but Hannah didn't wait for his response. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. She had lost everything, but for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Now, she had only one mission left: find James and fight for him. If you were in James' position, what would you do? Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.